Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. This video is all about my injury that I had and how I got back to full fitness and the lessons that I've learned, mistakes I've made. I'm going to make this quite a lengthy video so I can try and cover all aspects of this injury. So when those of you who are suffering with this injury, or Achilles tendonitis or Achilles injury, tears, whatever, you hopefully can watch this video and get a bit more of a summary of how my couple of years with this injury has gone and how I've managed to get myself out of being injured and light at the end of the tunnel. I've wanted to do this video for a while, and the reason why I haven't done it yet is I wanted to be pretty certain that this injury is now gone, that history is now a history in my life and I can move on. There's been times throughout the 2 years where I thought I was getting better. I would broadcast it because I was starting to get some training in, and actually I was nowhere near getting better. But I'm 100% confident now that things are going in the right direction. So I need to give a bit of a backstory really first. Those of you who've been following me on this channel for a long time have known how I've suffered with this injury, what my issues were, and how patient I've had to be to get over it. So I'm going to put a little timer on this screen right now, and hopefully this that timer will be when I start to talk about things I've tried, rather than about the backstory, which you probably don't want to hear about again if you've already seen it. So let's give a bit of backstory. So 2017, training was going well, doing well in races. Training was about 75, 80 miles per week, adding tons and tons of elevation in there. I think it was about 5,000, 6,000 feet of training. And this was into my off season. Feeling really, really good. I then had a couple of ultras in February and March. So my off season training changed slightly just after Christmas, where I started to bring it quite flat, no elevation, but a lot of speed work. Do I think the speed work was one of the culprits for my Achilles injury? No, I don't think so. But what I did do is I came off the training plan, and there was a Strava segment or Strava target of how much elevation you can cover in a month. And even though this wasn't part of my training plan, I decided that I wanted to make sure I did the challenge. So I've been doing all my training, 80 miles a week, and then I decided to do a quick 1,000 feet elevation climb, which is a mountain just outside my house. Sprint to the top of that, came back down, everything felt good. Came home, went up the stairs after a bit of a cool down, and then I felt something really, really sharp on the back of my heel, which I think now was where the tear was. I can remember thinking about it. I can remember the next step that did was another sharp pain. I'm not sure if that was a second tear or the same tear, but it was very, very painful just for that split second. And then I could carry on my normal day, had a shower, stretched off, all those things. And I was actually fine in the evening. I can't remember thinking, oh God, what have I done here? Have I really hurt myself? Next day, went out for a run. Very, very painful to start off with. It warmed up, pain had disappeared, fantastic. And then probably about halfway into my run, I can't remember what the distance was at the time, the pain came back with vengeance to a point where I was near enough hobbling on it. Walked home, realised that something seriously had gone in my heel. Started doing the whole Google, trying to find out what potentially my injury was. Did the Thompson test, which if you don't know what that is, check that out on Google. It's basically to find out, make sure you haven't ruptured your Achilles tendon. I hadn't, and I passed the Thompson test. So I just thought maybe this is just something I've got to just to rest. So just bear in mind at this point now, I had no warning whatsoever that my Achilles was in and having any issues. I wasn't getting pain building up. It just seemed to have happened. I can remember calves being tight, but the type of mileage I was doing, the type of elevation, I was suffering with a lot of DOMs anyway, and legs fatigue and so on. So I just took it as part of my training that I was doing at the time, and I didn't think anything of it. But I can't remember anything feeling like my Achilles is feeling really, really sore. What have I done here? It just happened on that one day going up the stairs, of all things. So what I did at this stage is I took a week's rest. And then on to, I think I was about 3 weeks away now from my first event with all this training that I've been doing. And I went back into running. I think my first run was okay. I did a short, I think probably like a 3-4 miler. And then on the second run, I was back to being in a lot of pain again, hobbling, just like I was back to square one. So I took a big decision to take the rest of the 2-3 weeks off before the event, which was a 50 miler. I thought just take all the rest, taper down earlier than I would do normally, get on the event, do the event. Came to the event, and it was my first time I have ever DNF'd in anything I do. I think I got to about 14 miles. I could feel it, but it wasn't stopping me running. And obviously with adrenaline pumping and all that sort of stuff, I was getting over. And then I think I got to about 14 miles, and surprisingly, without having a month's worth of training there, I started to struggle conditioning wise. Legs were heavy and so on. And then I got to, I think it was about 18, 19 miles, and then it became super painful. I think I was in first or second place at this time. And then I was starting to walk in a 50-mile ultra, which is not something I'm used to doing. I'm normally quite happy to run the whole thing. I can remember making the decision that I was going to drop out at a checkpoint, and then get into that checkpoint and then go. I couldn't make myself do it, so I'd carry on. And I probably made about 200 meters past that checkpoint. It was a bit of a hill, and I just knew straight away that I couldn't carry on doing another 30 miles with a tendon the way I was feeling. So I dropped out. And so many emotions with that, with frustration because it's the start of the season, embarrassment. It all went along with it. So I went off that race, and I decided to take a bit more time off. And I think I had a 100-mile ultra, I think it was probably about a month, maybe 5-6 weeks after. So I decided to have another 3 weeks off, which I did. Went for a run. Still nothing was getting better. By this point, I was now starting to try and self-diagnose. I was trying to work out what I had. And I worked out potentially I didn't have tendonitis, Achilles tendonitis, because on the back of the heel, which I'll show a photo of, most people have Achilles tendons quite high on the heel when they're struggling with that, and that's normally where it ruptures. My pain was literally right at the back of the calcaneus, right at the back of the heel itself. Didn't really I couldn't really pinpoint where the pain was, but the pain was just the whole of that heel. So I started doing eccentric drops, where I'm dropping the heel really slowly, started stretching more, calf raises, just to try and strengthen things back up to see if I could fix it, which I didn't. So I got onto third week now. I think I was about 2 weeks off for my next 100-mile event that I had planned, and I went back out for a run. Same scenario. I think I might have got 2 runs out of it. Not super comfortable. I could feel it, but it wasn't stopping me. And again, everything went wrong. At this time, I didn't realise that my heel was actually thickening quite noticeably compared to this my other my other leg. And as someone, when I took a photo of it, which I've probably got still on here, which I'll put on the screen if I still got it, you can see there's a big difference in the way the heels looked. So again, in denial, got into the race, 100 miler. I think I made it to 65 miles, I think it was. I must have walked about 30 miles of it. I realised I was going to get timed out if I carried on the pace that I was doing. And again, did the whole DNF, drop out. Again, embarrassment, frustration, season was going all wrong. And then I had another race coming up, which was about 2 months afterwards. Again, I decided to take 2 months off, no training whatsoever. It was another 100-mile race around the Yorkshire Three Peaks, very, very hilly race. And I actually managed to finish that event. And I think I finished in 3rd place. And at that point, I thought maybe I'm getting better. is one of those moments where I thought things were improving, but I was in a lot of pain. But I managed to. I wasn't going to DNF again. I was going to get through that course. And I think again, I think I walked about 40 miles of that. I felt like anyway, it was a lot of walk running, and I think the Achilles at that time went a little bit numb, and I couldn't feel things anymore. Apologies for that. And then I got to just turn the volume down so it doesn't go off again. So I finished that event, and then the next day, oh boy, could I not walk? I was in a lot of pain in the Achilles tendon. It obviously told me off. Done 100 miles on it, and I think this is probably one of the moments where things were starting to go really, really wrong for me, and I was just making things a lot worse. I then had another race about a month and a half after that, which was Race Across Scotland, which was a 216-mile race. I'm talking about it now. I know how stupid it was for me to even think I could be able to do this event. Got to the start line, super nervous because I just didn't know what my Achilles was going to feel like, and I knew I couldn't really want to enjoy the race because I just knew things weren't going to go as planned. And I remember stepping off the start line in pain. And again, I think I got to 30 odd miles, I think it was, and I got myself in a situation on the course where I couldn't get people to come and get me, to rescue me, to get me pulled off the course without getting a helicopter in to pick me up. So I ended up having to walk, and I think it was taking me about an hour to walk a mile, and I had about 4 or 5 miles to go to. So it was a very, very long journey getting back to the next checkpoint, and I was hobbling, sitting down all the time, trying to use my walking poles as crutches to get myself in. And it happened at the end of that race that not only would my Achilles was knackered at that point, I actually managed to fracture my shin. And my whole of my ankle was swollen, the anterior tibialis was all swollen up and injured, just because it had to do so much work because my Achilles wasn't working anymore. So I was causing more further damage, and that's when I realised that, surprisingly, that the whole 6 months of my year, that was the point it took me to say, this is me out for the rest of the season now. I'm going to have to really get this sorted. So to summarise on my backstory, this injury was an injury that I had pain in the back of the heel. I couldn't really pinpoint exactly where it was, but I knew it was around the actual bone heel itself, top of the ridge. It was never more than one side more than the other. I could walk absolutely fine, unless I've been running. It let me run sometimes. Sometimes I could run through it. Sometimes I really, really couldn't. Sometimes it made me hobble. I could do loads of calf raises. I could do eccentric drops. I could stand on one leg. All those exercises I could do with ease. Yes, there was thickening. I can definitely see the difference from one foot to the other. So if this is an injury that sounds very familiar to you, if I look back now, I wish I went and saw my GP straight away. Started the process off. Go and see my orthopedic, get those very important scans done, and get with a good physio who has an interest in sport, who wants to see you progress. And maybe I would have been maybe 7 or 8 months recovered last year rather than, dragging it out to a whole year trying to fix this myself. So what type of injury did I have once I've had the scans? So obviously at this point I had MRI scans and I've had x-rays. And those MRIs and x-rays showed that I had Achilles tendonitis, which a lot of runners can get very easily. I had bursitis, which was retrocalcaneal bursitis, which is, if anyone knows, a bursa is like a sac of fluid full of nerves, and they basically line bones from tendons, and tendons not constantly rubbing directly onto a bone. So between my Achilles tendon and my heel, that was inflamed. And also my insertional bursa was also inflamed. So that was top of the heel bone, and it basically protects your heel going up and down, basically, rubbing along that Achilles. And that was also inflamed. My insertional bursa was thickened, it hardened up, and it was out of shape. So every time I did walk on it, it used to put pressure on it. I also had bruising to the bone itself in the heel, and I'm guessing that's from trying to run on this injury for so long. And I also had a bone spur, so something called a Haglund's deformity. So this bone spur is based on the top of the calcaneal bone, right on the top of your heel. A bone spur had grown for one reason or another, and this bone spur wasn't particularly big, but it was sharp and it was hook-like. And this spur was digging into my bursa and it was digging into my Achilles tendon. So every time I stopped running, it would sort of recover to a certain extent. I'd run again, and this spur would eventually dig into burses and Achilles and really rip it all apart, and I was back to square one. So that was where my injuries were. So I've had a bit of selection of multiple injuries in that area. That's not to say that your injury is one of those. You can also get Achilles tendonitis where the pain is slightly higher than the heel, maybe like 2-3 centimeters up. It's normally the classic area where a rupture can happen. But plantar fasciitis, that, you know, those injuries, the arch of your feet, can also cause problems up the Achilles. You could have problems in your calves and soleus. All those things cause an issue, which is upsetting your Achilles. So there's still even more injury differences to mine that you could have, and that's why I still recommend seeing a GP. So what treatment did I have? So the treatment I had initially was I was sent for shockwave therapy. And this shockwave therapy it's meant to attack an area where potentially the body might feel like it's finished healing. The shockwave therapy is like a hammer, a nice hammer that digs into the injury, breaks it up a little bit, and which then the body knows it needs to get back in there and to repair the damage. So it's like a controlled injury from shockwave therapy. You have multiple sessions. I think I had 4 sessions on a weekly basis, and that didn't do anything for me whatsoever. It was painful to have it, but there was no recovery from that, and my body wasn't healing anymore. But from the scans, from the x-rays, it was worth a go, but we knew it wasn't going to fix it as such because this bone spur was there. I also had cortisone injections. So a cortisone injection into the back of my Achilles, into the bursa. It wasn't painful whatsoever to have that. So anyone is due one of those, don't worry about it. It worked for about 2 weeks. It brought all that information, and I mean it was instant. But as the weeks went by, especially at the end of 2 weeks, that pain started to return. Cortisone injection is like a load of fluid. It goes into, so it's inflamed. It pushes all the information out of it, so it can't enter. It allows you to do exercises to make that tendon stronger without pain. And eventually, once you've used all that up, depending on how painful it is, I suppose, or what you're doing, the pain might return, it might not. But wherever where my injury was in Achilles, it's quite dangerous to have multiple injections of cortisone in that area, because cortisone is known to attack tendons and degrade them a little bit. So we was only willing to give it one shot to see how much recovery or how much pain-free I would get. And with 2 weeks, it was hardly pointless even thinking about the second cortisone injection. Physio, I learned from the physio that some of the exercises that I was doing, like eccentric drops, was probably one of the worst things I could do at this point, just because when I went to dorsal flexion, where I dropped my heels and raised my toes, that was when the bone spur was then digging into the bursa and Achilles. So every time I was doing these exercises to try and fix it, because that's what Google said, and there's tons of stuff out there that says do lots of eccentric drops, I was irritating it all the time. So I wasn't actually giving it a chance to heal whatsoever. And that was the treatments before we decided that surgery was going to happen. Okay, so then I had surgery. Surgery was an incision onto the side of my heel. Went inside to remove the bone spur and take a bit of bone out. To give a bit more freedom, and I also had my bursas removed. Now, when the bursas were removed, because it had been chronic, it hardened, they take that out and a new bursa will form after a couple of weeks, and hopefully it's got no inflammation in it, it's brand new, and if I look after it, that bursa will act normal as it should have done. Nothing really happened to my tendon, Achilles tendon, but there has to be some sort of cutting to it because to get to the rest of the bone. So there was some surgery to that tendon itself. Recovery time, I mean, I would say to you it's going to take you a year. I'm 10 months now, so I was quite a few weeks in the boot, slowly building up to walking. Couch to 5k, your thing was about 6-7 months afterwards. But progress happens pretty quickly at that point when you start that. You get to do the things that you want to do, i.e. running, because you haven't been doing it for so long. And yeah, there is definitely light at the tunnel. I'm still got a little bit of discomfort. I think my last 3 runs have actually been completely pain-free. But I think this is going to take a 12 months for it to be something I'm not thinking about anymore, and I can really consider this is something that's completely gone. So things I learned about the tendon itself is there is a very fine line in the sense of what you can do on it before you re-hurt yourself, and gradual improvement. So I know for a fact that the tendon itself, when it's not injured, and you've never had an issue in the tendon, the fibers of that tendon are in straight lines. The tendon's not thickened, and when those fibers are straight and smooth, it's at its strongest composition. When you injure it, and it's trying to repair it, unfortunately, because there's no blood flow to the area and it takes a long time for areas that don't have a lot of blood flow to heal, it heals a bit messy. So those fibers in that tendon can end up being multi-directional. So they're not smooth, they're not straight up and down as they should be. And what you've got to do is you've got to basically break those up in small activity, so when it heals back, some more of them will eventually repair straight and smooth, and not all of them will. Some of them will again heal multi-directional, and you keep on repeating this process and eventually they're back to normal. But to find that fine line of doing too much is tiny. I can easily say going 5 minutes over in a run, because you're feeling good, could be the difference between you having another week of recovery before you can do that exercise again. It is tiny. And my physio has always said to me is the problem with us runners and ultra runners, I mean, itself, our pain thresholds are a little bit higher. So we use this pain threshold, our scale of 1 to 10, 10 being absolute agony, 1 being okay. And you can't run any more than a pain of 4. Anything more than that, your body's really telling you you're hurting it, you need to back off. But a pain 4 for us might actually be like a pain 7 or 8 for a normal person who doesn't do exercise. So you're already double the pain that you should be in, thinking that was a pain 4. And that was quite hard to try and work out actually what was acceptable exercise and what wasn't. And I think I had to go off the scale in the end of how it felt. If I felt it was painful in the evening, that was fine. If it was painful in the morning, I'd done too much. If it were completely pain-free the next day, I knew that level of exercise that I was doing was spot on. I also looked at over a 7-day period. So if I felt like, say for example, I was doing 3 walks, 3 runs, 3 strength conditioning exercises that week, if I felt like that last one wasn't as great as was on a Monday, I know for a fact that over that 7-day period, I was actually decreasing and degrading the quality of the workout. So I'll probably go in the right direction. If I felt like they felt all the same, or I felt like there was a bit of improvement on the 3rd session, I know that I could probably go to the next stage and keep on progressing. And that's literally how I worked out where my next step. But it's slow progress. There's no easy way to say it to you. It takes time. It's not a game ender. I thought it was. There were some moments where I thought, "There's no way in the world I'm going to get back into the running world." But with the correct treatment, the correct advice, correct guidance, you can get back up there relatively quickly. You've just got to know what that injury is to start off with, I think. Things like icing and heat What I found with those, I used to ice it. I used to put my foot in an ice bath. It did work to bring the pain down, but what I've learned is the tendon doesn't swell. It doesn't get inflamed. It just gets irritated. The bursas in there get inflamed, and that helped bring down that pain. But it only worked for a few weeks of doing it. But eventually, I think it felt like it just got used to cold water and went, no, that's not going to help me anymore. Painkillers never really worked. Didn't matter how much to take. I was even taking some really strong painkillers to try and get the inflammation down. Again, that tendon doesn't have inflammation, just the bursas do. Heat, again, is one of the worst things to do, adding heat to an injury, just because all you're doing there is when something's painful, it's already really, really hot. That's what pain is. And you adding more heat to that pain just kept up with the swelling really on the bursas itself. But I wouldn't say not to ice. I just say it's not something I needed to worry about on the Achilles tendon. And stretching was another one that I learned wasn't actually great for my tendon. Every time you stretch an injury like this tendon, you end up tugging at it, and that was actually irritating it. So I actually left it alone. I didn't do any stretches whatsoever on it. I'm starting to do them now, but I'm not being aggressive with it. I'm not really concentrating stretching. I need to stretch my Achilles. I'm stretching things like my hamstrings, quads, hip flexors, and that sort of stuff. I'm doing calf stretches, but I'm not really focused on that dorsal flexion to stretch out that Achilles tendon. And that's basically everything I can think of that might help some of you out there. If there is any questions or comments, or you're having issues with it, please send me a message on YouTube, and I'll get back to you what my thoughts are. I'm not going to be able to diagnose anybody. I might be able to say to you that sounds very similar to mine. But again, like I said, the best thing I can say to you, just go and get yourself checked out as soon as possible. Go and see that GP, start the process. It's a long process anyway because of the waiting time. COVID is making it even worse. And once you know what that injury is and what you're dealing with, it's so much easier to get around it. I tried changing trainers. I actually, being onto trainers, before we close this video down, I did used to run in road shoes with pretty much a zero drop. They were a nightmare. I think that's probably one of the reasons I can't wear them now. So I wear somewhere between 8 and 10 mil heel drops now. I find that's helped me a lot. I just thought I'd add that in about trainers. But like I said, any problems, any questions, anything you're suffering with, and you just want to ask me a question, feel free to send me a message. Hope you enjoyed the video. It's been a long one, but I hope it's helped people out there. Cheers, everyone.